Today I'm speaking with Diego Sequera. He's a journalist and a writer, and he's based in Caracas, Venezuela. And today we're going to be discussing the ongoing escalation of tensions between the United States and Venezuela. As many people are now aware, the United States has sent a large naval fleet into the Atlantic Ocean surrounding the waters of Venezuela. And Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have escalated their rhetoric and are becoming very aggressive. And there are concerns that the United States potentially could invade Venezuela or at least engage in a very aggressive form of quote unquote regime change. Just yesterday, they bombed a naval boat in the middle of the ocean. It was a small boat. They claim it was carrying drugs. Other people say it was just a regular fishing boat. So we're going to speak with Diego today to understand why all of this is happening and get a sense of what the mood is currently in Venezuela. So, Diego, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Diego, could you provide some context for people? Obviously, the United States has tried to overthrow the Venezuelan government many times. Can you tell us what is the United States' beef with Venezuela?
Well, the obvious beef is they don't have the same access, the same unrelented access they had to our resources back in since last century, basically, because the Bolivarian Revolution got into office in 1999, and ever since, at first it was, well, kind of lukewarm relations, but that quickly escalated to a hostile one. And ever since, we've been with current cyclic tensions with the U.S. government, first during the Comandante Chavez year, and then, of course, even far more intense and violent during the Nicolás Maduro years, already 12 years in office. And I'm talking about, since at least 2002, if you don't count the boycott previous to that, when all the major constitutional reforms and laws were happening, we went through the first, you could call it the first media coup of the century back in 2002, which actually, like most of the occasions of this, it has been the case, it backfired. It had a counter coup, a popular mobilization counter coup, and ever since, there have been this, cyclic chapters of confrontation. Although, ever since El Comandante died in March 2013 onward, things have changed. Their methods, their approach, and also, more importantly, in early March 2015, Venezuela fell into the sanctions program, into the sanctions regime. So that, of course, has undermined a lot of things, especially on the economic front. They have been exploiting also our usual structural weaknesses regarding being, back in those days, basically an oil-reliant economy. And but this is not only what the slow motion destruction sanctions usually ensue, but also different kinds of experiments ever since. In 2014, we went through a very violent insurrectional color-coded revolutionary process that at the end became like the raw material for the law that actually triggered the sanctions on Venezuela. Then after that, when with economy worsening all this time, a second attempt, in the middle of this, with a very significant win by the opposition in the National Assembly, our unicameral Congress, they tried to play the legislative branch to go rogue and to open the gates to regime change and to foreign meddling in a much more robust way. After that, we had the second election of Nicolás Maduro in 2018, and they didn't recognize those elections. So the following year, 2019, we had the fake presidency. So not only we had like a rogue parliament, but also a strained and also even more fake and rogue and even an illegitimate president Of course, many people know the Juan Guaido cycle. And throughout all this, and also a major insurrection also in 2017. I mean, so we've gone through so many things, and basically the U.S. hasn't been able to succeed with regime change. And this is a bipartisan thing. It's not that things cool off when there's a Democrat administration regarding a Republican one. This has been bipartisan all the way, all throughout, and we're basically now on the most recent chapters of it all, which has a connection, I think, with the past elections of July the 28th, 2024, which also brought another round of non-recognition, color-coded attempt, political and regional boycott, and this was before Trump and Rubio got into office for the second Trump administration. And it's now, this is basically the direct result of designating some criminal structures, and I'm not talking yet about el Cartel de los Soles, the Suns cartel. I'm talking about el Tren de Aragua, the TDA, being first designated as a narco-terrorist organization by a executive order, and therefore object to further procedures and also different approach of, operatively speaking.
So, Diego, would it be appropriate for me to say that, long story short, the United States corporate capitalist system seeks to destroy the current government so that they can infiltrate the country and extract its vast mineral and energy resources? As many people are aware, but for those who aren't, Venezuela, I believe, has either the largest or the second largest oil and gas reserves on the planet. Is that an appropriate characterization to summarize all of this briefly?
Absolutely, man. It's correct. It's as simple as. And yeah, it's the first oil reserves. It's the fourth gold reserves, the first gas reserves in the hemisphere. So yeah, you have huge amount of resources that are basically under sovereign hands, regardless of the pressure, regardless of the boycott, regardless of the blockade that the sanctions brought, regardless of secondary sanctions. So yes, absolutely. And I would add a third element to this, Ahmad, which is the human factor also. The human historical experience of being decided to take our own course, our own independent, sovereign foreign policy, and to be treated as equals by each and every government, including the U.S. on principle. But of course, that's not what's going to happen on the other end of this relationship.
Right. It's a continued story of attempted subjugation. Doesn't matter what you believe. A lot of people like to look at, for example, Iran. The U.S. will describe them as being oppressive to women, being extremist Islamists, and all of these different things. And they try to paint it as like a ridiculously conservative and oppressive religious nation. But then you look, at the United States relationship with the new Syrian government or Saudi Arabia, and you find that they're the same, if not worse, but the United States has no problem with them. And then you compare that to Venezuela, where there is no Islam, there is no oppression of women, but they still take issue. And so the issue isn't really democracy, it isn't freedom for women, it isn't religious beliefs. It's just ultimately whether or not you're going to let the United States come in and loot your resources.
Yeah, they basically don't care about the rights of anyone. And as you clearly stated with example, for example, of Syria, just to find the most descriptive one of these. And also the other thing is that the same kind of myths operates here regarding Iran and regarding Venezuela. And I'm quoting here from Flynn Leverett and Hilary Mann Leverett. They basically say that three operative foundational myths are in between the relationship between the US and Iran. And I think it's the same thing with Venezuela. The irrational myth, the irrationality myth, as it's an irrational government unable to make a coherent stance, and also that's why it opposes liberal democracies, rule-based order, or whatever. Then you have the isolation myth, which is we have no friends anywhere, and basically we're alone and isolated. And the third one is, I think it has to do with the violence. I mean, as in a violent and unreliable country. So it basically operates on the same levels. I'm not sure about the last one, but you get the idea anyway. And it operates the same way. So in the case of Venezuela, there's no Islamic culture to exploit. There's no, you can't be the anti-communist card. It's not enough. I mean, it only works with the culture wars in some places of the U.S. and so that's not as effective. You don't have the ethnic card either to balkanize and to divide and rule in that sense. So you have to basically criminalize. You have to show that. And I remind that the third myth is the illegitimate myth. It's an illegitimate government that reached power by illegitimate means. The same with Iran. So basically, that's it. It's to start from the basis that it's an illegitimate government by basically undermining anything that shows to have a decent image of a normal country, which is what we are basically, just like any other country in the world. So that's basically it. And in this case, so they focus more now on the criminal stuff. And this comes from the first administration. I've been saying this quite a lot, but I need to say it as much as necessary. But back in 2020, when the Guaido, 2019, 2020, when the Guaido thing basically didn't prove to be as efficient, as successful, 2019, I'm talking about April the 30th, May the 1st, the coup attempt, the failed coup attempt of Guaido back then, there was this meeting. This is told by Mark Esper, former Secretary of Defense, when they basically said, look, this is not working, what should we do? And this is when William Barr, by that moment Attorney General, basically proposed that, look, the whole democracy thing, the thing that we're bringing democracy to Venezuela dictatorship doesn't work. Let's basically indict Nicolás Maduro. Let's call it a narco state and take it from there. And so Venezuela it's not actually for them now a democracy problem, or at least foremost, but a criminal one, a security issue. So here's where the whole drug thing comes forward. And this is where the first bounty for Nicolás Maduro was 15 grand, I think, back then, 2019. Then the Biden administration raised it to 25,000, and then recently, of course, as you know, it was doubled by and announced by Pam Bondi like 3 weeks ago. So this is exactly the context where we are at now. In between this, they brought over another relic, another antique they got when they tried to further the narco state spin, which is the Cartel de los Soles, the Sun Cartel, which is a code word for the Suns, alluding to the generals as the Venezuelan army, at least its upper echelon, being like a vast narco structure that goes even beyond, Sinaloa, the Albanese clans or whatever. And in order to delegitimize. So in what sense the rationale behind this is, for once, remember, irrational, illegitimate, isolated, it's it's not a president. We don't recognize him as such. It's a rogue criminal kingpin, but also the army, which loses its legitimacy according to this narrative because they betrayed their promise of protecting the homeland or whatnot and became, another criminal structure with the drug dealing issue. And also it goes against all stated facts by all coherent, serious body that follows actually the track of the drug transport into the U.S., which basically it's like an overwhelming 95% or something or so through the Pacific, through Ecuador mostly right now. And there's a 5%, yes, that comes out from the Caribbean, that comes yes, from Venezuela, but and from northern parts of Colombia, but there's no drug infrastructure. There's a huge Venezuelan indictments of drugs. There's no fields, where they crop poppy or coke or whatever. There's nothing of that. And this is recognized by the UN, among others. Even there's a recent piece by Pino Arlaki, who was the head of the UNDOC, the UN agency that deals with drugs and crimes, saying basically that this is one of the most stupid arguments against Venezuela. It's basically all relied on oil because when I ran the agency, Venezuela was top notch, one of the best to work with. I never went to Venezuela, he says on this piece. It was published by El Antidiplomático. We published it in Spanish also in Admisión Verdad.
So these claims are essentially just a complete exaggeration. It's a lie. As you said, 95% of the drugs heading into the U.S. that come from South America are actually on the Pacific side, because the Atlantic Ocean is one side of South America, the Pacific Ocean is the western side, and so most of it is actually coming from Ecuador, which has been destabilized by crime and gangs and drug trade. So this is just an exaggeration. It's a lie, and it's meant to provide a pretext for the United States to aggressively escalate. Now, you mentioned earlier that this is a bipartisan issue in the United States where both sides of the aisle are doing what the empire does, which is destabilizing an actor that they consider to be in opposition to them. In this case, it's Venezuela. And you've laid out for us very clearly throughout this interview that this goes as far back as Hugo Chavez. And so you've had decades and decades and decades of pressure, and they've been escalating over the years, even during the Biden administration. Now, Donald Trump, usually they say when they give him a list of options, so it doesn't matter who's president, every president comes in and they're giving a list of options, and they're like, hey, we have imperial ambitions in Venezuela, and here are our options, just like they provide options in Iran. What Donald Trump usually does is he takes the most aggressive option because he likes to be aggressive. He thinks that's the fastest way to produce change. And it's also great for him to show his base that he's really strong and tough. And so just like with Iran, he escalated and took an aggressive approach in a way that Biden didn't. And now with Venezuela, he's taking a very aggressive approach. Other than Trump being this aggressive guy who loves the most aggressive option, in your mind, is there any other reason why the U.S. would be this aggressive right now? Is it like, do they potentially see blood in the water, and that's why they think if we just escalate a little further, we can actually topple the government? Or is it just strictly, in your view, Donald Trump just being blindly aggressive as he normally is?
No, yeah, it's a good question. Look, first, actually, Trump has a two-track approach to Venezuela. He has like the bad cop Marco Rubio and the good cop Rick Grenell. So basically, it's based on his previous bad experience and how he was duped or manipulated by Bolton and Pompeo and Rubio himself back then as well, with the Florida crazies, as Axios name called him once. But yes, and there are empire needs here, I think. When does this, timing is important here, Ahmad, which I think you have to take into account. Because of two things, basically. First of all, no success in Ukraine. Actual no success, doesn't matter how much he writes about it, regarding Iran. No success in Gaza. I mean, no peace, Nobel Peace Prize coming any soon, you know? So there's no big PR win for empire. So basically, it kind of seemed, and also, of course, even more important, I think, the Epstein scandal, as in trying to deflect the attention of something that was actually undermining the MAGA base, you know, especially the nationalist, conservative MAGA base of his support base of support. So I think all these elements interact with the fact that what they're doing. And there's another one here, which is Rubio himself. Rubio's own fixation with Venezuela, based also in another myth, which is like the Venezuelan government is sustained by the Cubans or something like that, which is pretty far from reality. And there's, I even dare to speculate, there's another one. I think there's some sort of deadline here, Ahmad. A deadline from, maybe it's part of the opposition leadership, something that our interior minister said a few days ago. And Rubio himself, I mean, you didn't hear Trump saying or stating or posting anything about Venezuela in the last weeks until yesterday, when the weird flimsy video of the Yeah, that kind of boat, we call it peñero here. It really looks like one, which is yeah, it's a fisherman boat. They're not that big, and I guess we're going to get into that later on. But my point is that before this, basically there was no Trump direct quote you can make of Venezuela, and suddenly we have this yesterday. And I think it has to do with maybe he now sees the option to own a possible, according to their own rational, success in the near future, I suppose. And so I think all these elements are operating, and they probably thought on the wider picture that Venezuela, facing, for example, Iran or other places, or Russia even more, or China, it's a softer target, and it's a hemispheric one. And remember, if you follow closely the way they have talked about Venezuela, of Latin America in general, what they've been doing at the penitentiary colony in all Central America, the way they're trying migrants, we are domestic policy now, and we are part of the inside of the building the hemispheric wall attempt, which has to do with also the sense of decline they always have, which is, by the way, something that's close to Rubio's heart. So that's what I think. I think all these elements are coming together at this point, and basically that's what created this juncture, and it was led. Marco Rubio, it's certainly leading the charge here, and Trump also needs the Florida votes in Congress for next future bills, for example, for midterm elections next year. They need an instant win. So I guess they conceive Venezuela as a prize.
I see. It makes sense. So it seems like there are a lot of factors. A lot of it are just simply domestic in nature, needing to show a victory in terms of foreign policy, as you stated. Ukraine is failing. Iran didn't go that well. China's still rising. We're not able to do anything there. So let's just appease our base and show them that our foreign policy is working by taking the softer hemispheric target in Venezuela, as you described, and then, feeding his base in other ways domestically in preparation. As you know, there are a lot of anti-Cuban, anti-Venezuelan voters in Florida, many of them migrants themselves, not realizing that they are migrants because of the pressure that the United States has put on Cuba and Venezuela and other countries. So very well said. Let me ask you this. What is the mood like in Venezuela? They have been under intense pressure, probably even more than Iran.
Yeah.
And the economic situation has been just abysmal in Venezuela. And, people like to point out that it's just a failure of the political and economic system in Venezuela. It is corruption, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, there's no doubt about the fact that it is the result of very intense covert operations to overthrow the government and sanctions. Abby Martin has done incredible reporting on this. I remember 10 years ago watching her on Telesur report on how they would target baby formula, diapers, anything they could do to reduce these luxury needs, they call them, these sensitive needs that society has. If mothers can't feed their babies, if they can't change their diapers, that increases a lot of tension, and that ultimately could lead out into people heading into the streets, which we saw. So, but it's beyond just diapers and baby formula. It's all kinds of things. People are really struggling in the country. So do people, the majority of them, let's say, obviously there are people who are against the government, they're upset, and they don't blame the US or the West for these sanctions, they blame the government. But for the most part, do people understand that they are under attack, that this is Western sanctions trying to destroy them and loot their resources? Do they stand in solidarity with the government? Are we seeing a rally around the flag effect like we saw in Iran? What is happening currently in Venezuela?
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, the mood right now, immediately right now, it's like any other day. I'm talking today, it's September the 3rd. It's noon. It's just like any other regular day, a normal day in Caracas. I actually work in a very bustling area of Caracas. It's a clear, if something is going on, you would see it in the streets, and nothing. It's suggests some sort of tension. Yet, as of now, of course, Regarding the economy, yes, we went through very bad years. It improved afterwards since 2022, 2022 onward. There's no, for example, there's no storage crisis. There's no products are all of them are available. The most pressing issue is regarding salary, the value of wages. That's the most complicated one, and inflation. Those are the most pressing issues, and that's basically one of the biggest concern of each and every citizen in Venezuela, including myself, by the way. And yeah, I mean, and people also are, we've been through so much, things have been so strained for so long that even people that don't support the government are actually more interested in just keep some normal standards and live our normal lives. So in that sense, you don't see, on the other hand, for example, you don't see a big enthusiastic takes of people inside Venezuela eager for the U.S. direct intervention of any sort. On the fringes, of course, there are, but it's not that common. And also, on the other hand, a lot of people enlisted in the militias during these days. A national mobilization was called, and our president also called it's going to be a republic in arms if push comes to shove, given if things get to that point. There's, of course, a media atmosphere which is different. I just read a few days ago a piece where I just have to write it down because it's such a weird name of Cody Whittle, some guy that by the way, he's from Florida. Now he's writing for the Telegraph. He wrote a piece like 2 days ago, and he was detained here for a few hours in 2019, by the way. And he looks like the grandson of the Mad Cover magazine, Alfred E. Newman. But he actually he wrote a piece in Telegraph saying that Venezuelans are claiming for Trump to intervene in Venezuela, which is, I mean, it's very weak, and also it just, you have to see who he quotes from to see how clearly there's this group that is always, they depend on the U.S. for whatever reason to achieve at some point regime change. There's no, it's not a sovereign opposition. But on the other hand, yeah, there has been, people are from Chavismo, they're mobilized when they're called. But there's another thing, and you can think of a similar situation during the Guaidó years. There's also a nationalist strain that goes beyond the partisanship here, and this kind of things could enable it even further. Some polls already say that the overwhelming majority of people don't agree. They could agree with a change of government, but they don't agree that a U.S. intervention will be the solution. If you push that further, it's going to backfire even more. And I think that's important. I think they don't realize the value of nationalism in that sense, regardless of how people could be tired of politics in general because of 10 years of sanctions, 10 years of difficulties, 10 years of pressure. But that's the atmosphere right now, Ahmad. Nothing out of the common for now.
Well, that's very good to hear. Diego, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Can you point us in a direction? Where can people find your work?
Yeah, please. Not only my work, but the rest of the team who actually are the one who works, they work more than I do, which is misionverdad.com, truthmission.com. Some of the pieces are being translated in English by Orinoco Tribune. You can also AI it, and I mean, it's easy to read, to translate it with any of these tools. I also publish some stuff with Press TV, sometimes the grades, it depends on the moment, and depends of the needs. So basically that's it. Those are the places. And also our Telegram channel, I think it's quite good. I think those are the places to go, and thank you, man, for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And we'll be in touch again very soon. Hopefully things do not escalate further, but I imagine they could. And if they do, we'll definitely get you back on the show. I'm going to be putting your content on the screen, and links to this Telegram channel and your other work will be in the description of this video as well. So Diego, thank you again, my brother. Take care.
Thank you. You too, man. You too.